Hello everyone, welcome back. As usual, if you can turn on your cameras, the better. For today, we have been working with user stories. Your requirements. Important to understand the requirements, important to understand the difference between the functionalities and the non-functional requirements. All of them go to a repository. All of them, you need to store them in some place. That place, the product backlog. This picture of this idea of this stack of things is what you have, the starting point of your project. The task that you need to accomplish. Obviously, the first thing that you put there, and we already reviewed, is your stories, the one that you review and complete and validate with the invest principles, but also the epics. The only difference, the epics, the ones that are still being reviewed and not split in a small task, you put them down like things that are going to be done in some point. The stories, the ones that are ready to go, they should have kind of a priority at the top of the stack, because a programmer can take one of those and start working. Now, those are not the only things that you put in the product backlog. A lot of you asked me about this before. What happened with all the things that we need to do that are related with the project, but they are not requirements? They cannot be classified as requirements because they do not follow the definition of requirements, functional requirements. Well, product backlog. The product backlog, this stack that I show you, is the place in which you put all the tasks that you need to do, including the requirements, but others also. Which ones? Well, in red, the definition for your exam. We are going to ask you, what is the product backlog? Key ideas, task, the task to do, not the requirements, and the priorities. There is a priority in the stack. At the top, the priority, down, those that have a low level priority. Anyway, inside, the items. Every one of these is called a product backlog item. An item in the product backlog. They can be several things. One of them, as we mentioned, features, functional requirements. And here I am talking about, as I mentioned, the stories, but also the epics. Those that you have complete and those that you haven't. Epics here, low priority because you still need to do grooming, improve them. Stories here, they are ready to go. These are the easy ones, but I want to be clear, is use one of the categories that you put here. The other categories, 3 things that you put here in the task that you are going to follow to complete your project. Second one, any bug that you need to fix. Obviously, this is not going to happen in your first iteration. This is not to happen the first time. The first time, the only thing that you have is probably functional requirements and other things. But in some point, you are working in the middle of the sprint, and you're going to figure out that your project have a bug, that in your project you have a problem. And that problem needs to be fixed. It's not a new requirement. You're not going to add that as a functional requirement, but you need to put in some place the product backlog, the task, that bug, that error, that situation need to be fixed. Now, 2 things. You can fix it immediately, and therefore you create the tasks to report to your team that you did this, you fixed this bug just because was that. Or you just create the task, put in the product backlog, and later the next sprint, if that is priority, is going to be fixed. So these guys, you can use the same template as I want to. You can follow the template to document a defect, to document the activity of fixing a bug. Again, it is not mandatory. It is optional. Some people follow the template for everything. But if you follow the template to document a bug, to document a defect that needs to be fixed, that doesn't mean that that thing, just because it's in the template of the story, is a requirement. It's a bug that you or your team found need to be fixed. Requirements from the user. Fixing a bug, something internal in the team. And again, first iteration, you do not have that. You haven't started working. Anyway, defects. Moving forward. Sometimes in your projects, something that you need to do is some technical work. You're going to use databases and you need to set up the database. You need to install a particular tool that you're going to be using in order to do the developing. You need another particular tool for the testing. You need a server. Whatever thing related with technical things that should be done, someone is going to do that, someone in the team. Therefore, it should be a task for that person. Otherwise, that group is not working in functional requirements. It's working in something. It's collaborating with the project. But again, the technical work, set up the database, set up a connection to the cloud, install a server, a tool, whatever. They are going to be product backlog items, tasks that someone in the team is going to do, but not requirements. Keep that difference in mind. So technical work. And finally, if you need to learn something, we talk about this in some point. What happens if I ask you to do a project and that project involves drag and drop? That project involves swing, graphical user interfaces, plotting something. Someone in the team needs to do research about which library to use or how to use it. And that is work. And you should be paid for that. I mean, it's something that you can put in your report. The hours that you work. Knowledge acquisition. It's a task that you can put in the product backlog. And obviously, it's a task that is going to be assigned to someone in the team. And probably one person in the team during the week, during the sprint, can use all the time, his time, her time, use learning something. Because in the next sprint, with that knowledge, is going to implement something. So, summary, product backlog, the tasks that you're going to do for the project include functional requirements, features, epics, or stories. The things that you have already done, complete, ready to go, the things that you're working, but also knowledge acquisition, defects, bugs, or any technical work that you need to do. All of this go to the product backlog. Clear. 4 things. And all of them easy, right? Moving forward. For all of them, not only for the functional requirement, but for all of them, we need to take care of the following things. In general, everything in the product backlog should follow this. Remember, for the stories, we talk about invest, and each letter represents one characteristic, what feature. For the product backlog, something that we want there is a product backlog that is deep. Details, emergent, estimation, and priorities. In the product backlog, something that I want to see in your product backlog is there are appropriate details. And this is important because the level of detail for the story and the level of detail for the epic is different. One is a story, what is an epic, one is done, the other I am working on it, but details in the level that correspond. Emergent, I am going to talk more about that. Estimation, anything in the product backlog should be able to have an estimation for everything. Knowledge acquisition, defects, features, whatever, for all of them, you should be able to say, how many times do you need? Knowledge acquisition, you're going to learn about drag and drop. Estimation, how many times do you need to learn about drag and drop? How many times do you need to learn this new library? What is the effort there? I am going to talk more about the estimation numbers, but you should be able to estimate every single product backlog item. And connected with that, also, all of them need a priority. All of them should be able to say if they are high priority, low priority, medium priority. It doesn't matter if it's learning or features or technical, they are high priority or not. Yeah, also the epics, good question. Also the epics are going to have an estimation. For the epics, I am going to show you the slides, but the estimation is a little bit more open. For instance, you can have used small, medium, large, or extra large epics. It's a really big approach for epics. It's like, well, this is an epic, okay, it's complex, it's not small, but considering that it's an epic, it's a small epic, a medium epic, or an extra large epic, used to give an estimation. The stories, on the other hand, they receive an estimation that is more numeric, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to talk about the scale. So yes, even the epic needs an estimation, even though the scale is a little bit different. Knowledge acquisition is part of the product backlog, but it's not going to be a requirement. It's not part of the features of the program. Think about it. This is my product backlog. If I am going to put something here, this item there is a functional requirement, or is an effect, or is something that I need to learn, or is some technical work that I need to do. It's only one of those categories. The documentation, how do you put that here? Usually, for all of them, you're going to follow the template. You can follow the template. You can say, as I want to. Just be careful. The I want to, even though you follow that template, that doesn't mean that what you are doing is a requirement, a feature. You can follow the template, and as a developer, I want to learn how to do drag and drop. You follow the template. You are talking about something that you want to learn. It's not a requirement. It's not a functionality in the system. It's not one of these. However, it's a product backlog item. It's something that should be done in order to move forward in the project. That is the only point. Okay, very good question regarding the sprints. This is the product backlog. Here we put everything that the project needs. And we're going to talk about this, but from the product backlog, you are going to have a meeting with your team, a planning. You are going to plan your sprint, and you are going to create your sprint backlog. The sprint backlog is going to be another stack, but that one have only the tasks that you are going to work during the sprint. And those tasks come from the product backlog. So think about it. There is in the middle of the room a stack of different things that need to be done. And suddenly with your team, you are going to go, you're going to pick some of them, the ones that highest priority, hopefully, and you're going to commit to complete that subset in 1 or 2 weeks. And that subset become your sprint backlog. Sprint backlog, what you're going to do in 1 or 2 weeks. Product backlog, the big database, the big stack with everything that needs to be done. Remember the key idea with Agile. In Agile, you can continue with your sprints forever. Because basically every sprint is go to the product backlog, take a subset of tasks, and work these 2 weeks. Again, another subset, 2 weeks, another subset, 2 weeks. Theoretically, if there is no new requirements from the customer, in some point, your product backlog is going to be empty. Your project is done. But if the customer keep asking for new features or keep asking for changes, the only thing that happens is that the product backlog is always going to have something there. So you can continue planning new sprints for an indefinite number of time and continue working in doing the changes or the fixes or the new features that the customer is keeping asking. So the product backlog, the global database, from that, you take a subset of items to do in your sprints. Good? Okay. So again, the key idea, requirements, defects, technical work, and knowledge acquisition. 4 different things, all of them product backlog items. One of the items, one of the categories are the requirements. Not all of these are requirements. The product backlog have more than just requirements. Have requirements? Yes, but not only that. Now, talking about the deep. Number 1, details. Key idea here with the details is very simple. Every single thing that you know about the project, go to the product backlog. Everything. Invest or not invest. Everything you're going to put there with only one condition. Things that are large, things that are unclear, things that are not invest should have a low priority. The representation for that is should be down in the stack of the product backlog. On the opposite, the things that are invest, your stories, they should have a higher priority than those that are not. So stories are going to be at the top, epics are going to be down, because always, always, always an epic is going to have a priority that is lower than the stories that I have ready. Now, what is going to happen with these priorities? Well, with your stories, here, you're going to have stories with priority 1, 2, 3, I don't know, maybe even 10. The key idea is that if we have stories with a priority 10, that seems low, my epics, maybe I want to be just giving numbers. It's a clear difference than, even though the stories have different levels of priority, that maybe the 1, 2, and 3 are going to go to the next sprint, and maybe the 10 is going to wait for the next 2 weeks. That is the work that should be done, because that is the work that is ready to go. But there are more. And you notice the graphic with the size of this. The most important feature for a requirement, when you move that to the product backlog, when you transform that to an item here, the first one that you review is size. Something short, something that one person can do in a sprint. This is the product backlog, but the goal is these things that are here at the top, the ones that are top priority in the product backlog, those are the first ones that are going to move to the sprint backlog. Those are the first ones that are going to be done. So they should be invest, but particularly small. And remember, small, basically one person can do it in 2 weeks. Small, not too small, they are not instructions. Okay, so levels of details, the things that are stories have a better level of details at the top. Epics, usually the details are not there yet. We need to work down, top, down, stories and epic. That is something that we expect in the product backlog. Moving, emergent. something that you do with the product backlog, and we need to talk about the different people involved in an agile team. But there is always one element in the team that is responsible for keep this update. Think about your product backlog like your database of activities. There is one person that keeps this database updated. There is no task or activity done or to be done that is not here. This is the control point of what work the people is doing or is going to do, or if I need more people because the activities here should be done in a shorter period of time. This is the core of the project. In any moment, you can add elements to the product backlog. In any moment, as a customer, I can ask for changes in something, for new requirements. And the only thing that is going to happen is those new requirements, those changes, the bugs that you detect while you are working today, everything go to the product backlog. Like put another piece of paper in the stack. Someone do that, and someone is responsible for keeping all of these new things with a level of priority and with an estimation of the complexity. Always update. If the customer asks you for a change in the middle of a sprint, you are not going to start working in that change immediately. We talk about it. You are going to wait to the next sprint in the best case scenario. However, immediately you are going to put a documentation of that request in the product backlog. You are going to put that request in the database so you know that there is a request for changing something, learning something, update something, fixing something. Emergent. The concept, the word is all about this thing is constantly updated and rebalance and reprioritize. These two, balance and prioritization, very simple. Even though you put here at the top a new story and this new story have a priority 5, well, this story is going to move down and it's going to be with the other stories that are level 5 and so on. Maybe there is a new requirement. The new requirement is a new epic because it's kind of open, unclear, and so on. You put the epic in the product backlog, not the epic, the rebalance, the reprioritization. Even though you put this here today, it's going to move down with the other epics because epics have a low priority. So emergent always is being updated with new information, always is being rebalanced or reprioritized. Shorting the list of tasks according with priority and according with complexity. Details, emergent, estimation. Estimation, and here let's talk about the units. Estimation, two things. You can have epics, you can have stories. And when I talk about the stories, as I mentioned before, you can use stories to document bugs, and you can use stories to document knowledge acquisition, and you can use stories to document technical work. If the bug, if the technical knowledge, if the technical work, you have a specific description of what that is. If you know what exactly you need to learn, I need to learn drag and drop in Java. That is very specific. That is the same that having a story, something specific. I need to learn drag and drop in Java. If you have something to learn that is too open, the customer wants machine learning here. The customer wants this to be some kind of intelligent. Okay, I need to learn about artificial intelligence machine learning. I have no idea which library I am going to use. I have no idea exactly what the customer wants because that part is still an epic. But I know that in some point we need to learn something machine learning with Java. You can document knowledge acquisition as something that is an epic, as something that is not still clear or is not small, is not specific. With the box, if you found a box in the program, if you found something that need to be fixed, usually they are going to be here. I mean, if you notice that something is failing, usually you're going to have kind of a good information and a good context of what should be fixed. Is a particular method, is a particular class, is a particular functionality, is a particular situation there failing, usually here. But also could happen that you have an error, you have a bug, and you have no idea what is happening. I mean, the program is sometimes work fine. When the professor comes, the program is working, but suddenly Fridays, the system is not working, and I have no idea what is happening. You know that it needs to be fixed. You know that you should report it, but you have no a good context of what is happening. Therefore, someone needs to research about the situation. That could look like something here, two activities: research for the bug, search for the bug. Or if that is not a priority, if you sometimes happen, but usually work well 2 years and then crash, it could be an epic, even though we're talking about error detection, defect detection. Work in the same with the technical work. So if you have something that is here, the stories, again, doesn't matter which is the category, but if you have something here, it have a high priority. If you have something here, have a low priority. However, what you use in order to specify the priorities, well, for the epics, as I mentioned before, it's going to be something very open. Large, extra large, extra, extra large. You can work with that. For the stories, two things that are very specific: story points or time. Time in days or time in hours, up to you. Time. How long is going to take for you, for your team, to do this particular activity, this particular fixing of the defect, this particular knowledge acquisition? How many hours do you need? Or you want to talk about days? How many days you need? We consider 1 day 8 hours. So you can talk in any of those two units. Or if you are not able to estimate the time, the days or the hours, your other option is story points. Story points. Help me, what is a story point?
The complexity of the story?
Yes, the complexity of the story. Story points is going to be a number, and that number represents the complexity of the story. The complexity of the story from the point of view of whom?
Of the developer.
All the developers, all the team, right? So let's see. You're going to have a story. You have your story and you look to the story and you identify, hey, this one is an epic. Okay, this one is an epic. The only thing that we need to classify is an epic, therefore is some kind of big, but this normal big, extra big, too big. It's just a very subjective thing. We have a story. Okay, if we have a story, team, do we know how many hours do we need to complete this story? For the Pac-Man video game, we need to make the Pac-Man move. Do we know how many hours do we need in order to program a yellow circle moving around the screen? If you have experience, if as a team you have been working for a long time, if you're a senior developer, probably your answer is going to be, yeah, of course. Pac-Man moving, mouse listener or key listener, 100 lines of code, I need 1 day, 3 hours plus the testing plus 1 day. If you can use days, good, but usually that is not possible. Usually that is not possible because two things. You do not have the experience or your team do not have the experience. Because think about it. You can have the experience. You can be able to estimate one day, but maybe your team is not able to provide an estimation with days. Your team is not aware about how to work with this Pac-Man thing and the graphics. If you or your team is not able to do estimation with time, that is the moment in which you move to story points. Story points, very simple. We are a team, and as a team, we're going to use numbers, and with those numbers, we're going to guess the complexity of the story. It's just about guessing. It's just about my perception of the particular work to do. Common ideas. It's like playing poker. It's like each of the members of the team is able to mention a number. A number is like show a card. And you have your numbers. And for each of the stories, you, according with your own experience, is going to select how many points you give to the story. How many points? Well, if you have something that, according with your own perception, your feelings, guessing is small, medium, large, very large, huge. These are just ideas. But you choose a number, you share the number with your team. The only thing happening here is you are sharing your own point of view of that particular task. Which numbers to use? In general, as a team, you can select a scale to use. Common choices are the three that I put in the slide below. In order to avoid kind of match, it's like we use Fibonacci numbers. Fibonacci numbers mean basically that you can use the 1, the 2, the 3, but after the 3 you move to 5, and after 5 you move to 8, and after 8 you move to 13. The idea is, if you think that something is small, you have several levels for small. You can think, well, this is small 1, 2, or 3. But if you think that something is medium or large, you notice that you do not have a lot of space. It's like, well, it's medium, large. So you're talking about 5, 8, 13. You cannot use 6, 7. You cannot play with those numbers. It's like small, several options. You can classify the small things with several different levels of small. But then the idea is to jump, big jumps, if you really think that something is medium or large. Binary, similar idea, but here you work only with 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. Again, small things, several different levels of small. But when you move to medium or large, it should be something that can be noticed immediately. There is always the option to work linear. It's not recommended. Again, the idea is to really jump the differences. How does it work? I showed you a story. I showed you a story like there is more. I used to say a short sentence. This is one of the stories, one of the requirements for the Pac-Man that we reviewed before. Just imagine that I asked you, help me to implement a version of the Pac-Man video game. So I have this story. And this story corresponds to a feature, is a functional requirement. And I want to know the complexity of implementing this for you, for the team. Option number 1, as I mentioned before, the time, but maybe you do not have experience with graphics. So the option number 2 is story points. And story points, you are my team. And I am going to ask every one of you in my team, how many story points you think this story should have? We can work with the binary approach. Easy one to remember. Binary approach. Team member number 1. Do you think that this is easy, complex? Which is your number? And probably that one is my senior developer, and he's going to tell me, you know what? That one is moving the ghost. It's a 2. Because you need to do this automatic movement according with one particular algorithm. 8. You know what? It's kind of a complex scenario. 4. These numbers, what I am going to do is obviously consider all of them. I am going to use all of them and extract the average for my team. The number at the end is going to be the complexity of this task, not for one person, not for the majority, but for the team. These numbers help me to classify the difficulty of all my stories, but also those numbers tell me a lot about the technical skills of my team. Think about it. I am going to ask you to do a project. If I ask you to do the Pac-Man, I have 10 teams here. These numbers, the average, the difficulty of the story for all of you, probably is not going to be the same. For one of you, maybe it's like this. For someone else, maybe it's just a 1. There is not good or bad story points. There is not a correct or incorrect answer. However, remember, it talks about the technical skills in your team. If you are the team that always put higher values to the stories, if you just put 16 to everything, just to tell your customer that everything that needs to be done is complex, yeah, you are evaluating the project, you are evaluating the story, but also you are talking about your technical skills and the technical skills of your team. It's like, well, if for everyone else, this story is level 1, story point 1, and for this particular team is, for most of them, for the average, 16, probably the problem is this particular team, not the complexity of the requirement. So for every single story, again, requirements, knowledge acquisition, bugs, or technical task, you need to classify the estimation, hours, or story points. Story points, a common practice, planning poker, numbers. Each team member give a number. Which number? Depending on what you are using. You can use linear numbers, Fibonacci, binary, and there are more. But the idea, the small get classified with more options than the medium or the big ones. That's it. Good? Yeah, they are subjective. Yeah, again, as I mentioned, the story points are subjective. Is a very subjective measure. What you think is a 2 and I can think is a 4 or a 16 is very, very subjective. But again, it's like when someone shows you a picture and the question is, what are you looking to the picture? What the picture represents for you? It's a subjective answer. However, your answer is talking about your way of thinking. When I ask you to evaluate stories, whatever number you select, not with the first story, not with the second one, but as a team in the long period of time, is talking about your thinking. If you put a 16 to every single story, even those stories that other people classify as a ones, that is talking somehow, suggesting your skills. My advice, the reason because I'm mentioning this, guys, evaluate your stories for real. It is not a good idea. It is not the goal to put higher numbers to everything. You need to show an about dialog box. What is the complexity of that? 16, 32. Just because I want more time. Just because I want this to be complex and therefore more people involved. That is not the way that this is supposed to work. Yes, you're going to assign the complexity. Yes, that is going to be connected with the timing and with the people and the resources. But you need to be honest because remember, the world is looking at you. Do not put extra points in the stories. Be honest. And obviously you are going to receive experience, and more experience you have, the same story, automatically you are going to start classifying stories that maybe 1 year ago was 16, the next year is going to be 8 or 4 or maybe a 2, because now you know exactly what to do. That should be there in your answer for the points. Good? Okay, so stories. There is this tool online. Some people use that. Basically, you can be anonymous. You can connect all your teams there, and each person select points, card, and at the end, the tool give you the final result, the average. So you never know which member of the team provide the lower or highest numbers. That is sometimes a practice. If you do not want to expose yourselves, if you do not want to be biased, because my partner already put that 2, and I was thinking at 16, so I do not want my team to look at me like I am the one with the lowest skills. You can do this process kind of anonymous. So if you'd like, at the end, we have the value and we are not exactly aware who think what is an option. Priorities. Priorities is different than the estimation. Just to be clear, estimation, you are talking about the complexity of time, the complexity with these points. The priority, something could be complex, but it's important, have a high priority. Something could be easy, but that doesn't mean have a high priority. You can put that in the lowest level. Every single element in the product backlog, and therefore later in the sprint, every single element, doesn't matter which is the category, should have a priority. And the priority should be connected with this idea of what should be done first. You have knowledge acquisition. You need to learn something. Is a priority? Yes or no? Is something that can wait for later? Or is something that should be a priority because the second part of the project, you need that knowledge? You have a bug. That is something that should be fixed immediately in the next sprint, or can wait. No one is going to notice. Similar with requirements or changes. Every single thing, priorities. Now, priorities, those are kind of easy to assign. Usually you're going to think about the number 1 as the top priority. This should be done as soon as possible. And for that, down, how many levels? As many levels as you need. Usually you're going to keep 1 to 5 or something like that, but it's depending on your project and it's depending on the size of your product backlog. But one is do this immediately, kind of. In the graphical representation, as usual, higher priority top, lower priority down. Something that usually helps to assign priorities is think about release. Think about different versions of the software. Think about release 1, 2, 3, and so on, and try to put everything that you want in a release 1 with a similar priority, 1 or 2. Everything that you want in a second release with a similar priority, 3, 4, 5. Everything that can wait for a next release, release 3, well, put priorities down, 7, 6, 8. The epics always down to the end, 100. Remember, an epic that is priority 100 today could be split in 2 stories that are priority 1 tomorrow, part of the grooming process, part of the update. Being a priority 100 today, because it's unclear, it's not complete, we need to talk with the customer. Tomorrow, after one meeting, that priority 100 could become 2 or 3 stories priority 1. No problem with that. Is the product backlog? People is working with a sprint backlog. This can change, no problem. The sprint backlog, that is the one that is frozen. That is the one that is in production with the team. They are working. But this, we can update every day. Talking about that, another way to think about it. If you do not have an idea of releases, if you do not have an idea of submit this and deliver that and then that, the other thing that you can think about it, for instance, for your project, in your project, usually I am not going to ask you for version 1, version 2, version 3. I am going to ask you just for the project. What you can think about is which are the must-have features in the project, which are the most important things, which are the things that I need to complete that are going to give me most of the points in my grade, which are the things that are not so relevant, that maybe if I do not finish, still I can submit something and have a good grade. And finally, which are those things that are maybe 1 or 2 points that probably I am not going to finish. I don't care to finish. I am okay with an 80. I do not want the 190 grade. So maybe those things, I don't care. I am going to do those 1 hour before the submission. It's a good idea to put the priorities according with what things give you more value. Whatever is the meaning of value. Those things that are going to give you more money, better grade, whatever. Priorities. Those things that are the core of the system. You're going to do a system like Canvas. I am assuming that setting up the database, even though it's a technical activity, probably is going to be priority 1 because everything else is around using the database, or at least priority 2. Having the database in a low priority could be a bad idea because you're not going to be able to showcase your project working everything together, everything integrated. Talking about the Pacman, probably the Pacman moving, the Ghost moving, those 2 should be there, priority high. The maze, the labyrinth, even though it's important, I will say it's priority 2 because at least you can submit something that have the 2 elements moving, the keys and the other chasing things, even though it's in a white space. Number 2, the maze. Number 3, or at the end, the score or other graphical things that are used decoration there, the colors, the fruits, things like that. 1, 2, 3. These priorities are going to control your work. Remember those 3 keywords? I give you the slide. It's going to be a question in your exam. What is this? Basically, changing the priority, reprioritize, changing the estimation, the time or the story points, reestimating, and refining details, as we mentioned before, epics that become stories. Something that is unclear become clear. Or adding verification criteria to your stories, whatever, adding information, changing values, values for the priorities, values for the estimation, whatever. You can do whatever you want with the product backlog in any moment. Looks like, well, good. The key is that one person in your team, product owner, we're going to talk more about the roles, but you can remember the name. Usually that is the guy that is going to be responsible for keeping safe the product backlog. Is the one that is going to control the product backlog. However, the estimation and inserting or removing things is something that happens in the team. The team work together in order to decide what is a priority, what is not, the story points, etc. But there is someone that should keep the database, someone that should be the owner of the database, something that at the end record the changes. And it's going to be someone in your team that we're going to call the product owner. Later, we need to talk about the roles. You can have more than one product backlog. Usually we think about one product backlog per product. If you split your product in sub-products, you can also split your backlog in sub-backlogs. Think about a tree, and you can have a product backlog that is the root, and that root split in different backlog for different teams or for different components in a system. Again, the product backlog, the root, or the other product backlog, the hierarchy, they are not yet Spring backlog. They are the database, the global database for the product, the global database for a characteristic, a component in the product. These ones could be this one or one of the smallest ones. We are going to split them into Spring backlog, and the team is going to work and develop with the Spring backlog. We're going to talk about that later. For the product backlog, one per product, or you can split and have one per component in the product. Or usually when you have several teams working in the same product, but in different features or in different sub-products of that product, you give to each team its own product backlog, its own database of tasks that they need to do. The concept, hierarchical backlog. The same product, different components, different features for the product. Test yourselves. What if I ask you, after all this thing, invest. Now you can apply deep. What if I ask you for the product backlog? Give me the product backlog for a particular product. For instance, product backlog for the Pac-Man video game. I want you to develop the Pac-Man video game in Java. Can you think about the product backlog there? The stories, the features, you already did it. You already have it. The epics and the stories. What about the technical work? What about knowledge acquisition? What about the facts? You don't have it yet. Technical work and knowledge acquisition. There is any technical work or there is any knowledge acquisition item that you will put in a product backlog for doing the Pac-Man video game? Ideas. Technical work. Any technical work related with doing this game? Yes, no, maybe. Ideas. Like nothing? Good. You mentioned graphics, libraries for the graphics. In which category you will put that? The graphics, the research, the libraries, the audio interfaces that is going to be connected probably also with libraries. Is technical work or is knowledge acquisition? Knowledge acquisition. Technical work. Do I need to set up a database? Do I need to do the setup of some particular system, setup of some particular library, setup of anything special? And probably for the particular case of the Pacman, I will think about, no, there is no particular or special technical work. Guys, having a developer environment, having Eclipse or IntelliJ or whatever, that is kind of the normal tools for any developer. So it's not like technical work. I need to install my developer environment. Please, no. You are working in a company developing software, or you are the software developers. You already have that. So technical work, anything that is special, new, that you have not there already. Again, the classical example, you need to set up a database, you need to set up a particular tool or environment because this software or this system in particular work with connecting to a service. I don't know, anything very, very special about the system. And thinking about the Pacman, there is nothing special in the Pacman as a software. An emulator, yeah, that could be the idea. An emulator for something, again, something special. Not your developer environment, not the classical libraries that you use every single day, not the libraries that are core of Java. In this case, for instance, the graphical libraries, they are there with the Java that you have in your computers. There is nothing special. Maybe you can research about new libraries, but look into the Pacman, you can fulfill this software with the basics. So technical work for this scenario, probably, unless you think about something else, I will say probably for this one, technical work, there is nothing to be done. However, knowledge acquisition. This is the space in which you can put that you need to learn something about graphics. I will assume that you do not need to learn about anything graphics. I mean, again, knowledge acquisition, if you are in a company, I could assume that you know Java, and I could assume that you know graphics. You did some project with graphics in the school. So it is not like mandatory that you put here knowledge acquisition, graphical libraries from Java. It could be assumed that you already know that. But well, if that is not the case, it's like this is the point in which you mentioned, you know what, task, I need to learn more about graphics in Java. And I need to know more, and this is going to have a priority one because it's the first thing that I am going to do in my first sprint. Moreover, in the estimation, this is going to take me 4 hours, 1 day, whatever. You know what? No one in the team is aware of graphical libraries. So as a team, we're going to put story points to this idea of learning graphical libraries. And as a team, we're going to play poker and say, well, how many times do we need? How complex could be to learn graphical libraries? And we can say, it's going to be a 2 or a 4 or what, 16, 32. That is going to talk about, well, the level of experience of the team. If you have experience with another graphical library, not in Java, but in another language, maybe your points are going to be more in the 2, 4. But if you have never, ever worked with graphics, well, probably you're going to put higher points just because it's something unknown. And as a team, you're going to know that. Yeah, if you need to learn something related with the domain, it's not the case with the Pacman, but think about you are doing some kind of software for a financial institution, and you need to learn something in particular about equations or formulas to be applied in some particular place of the software, because you're going to program those processes. So you need a little bit of knowledge about how that is done on paper. Yeah, that could apply there. Knowledge acquisition about the domain, and obviously there is the number of hours that you're going to use with maybe someone from the customer that is going to teach you or help you, or reading a particular book or document or whatever. Yeah, it's part of the knowledge acquisition. Good. So for the Pacman, maybe libraries, graphical libraries could be okay. And hopefully the estimation that I could expect is kind of low. It's not so complex. The effects, well, is something that could happen maybe in your second sprint and so on. Someone crashed the GitHub repository. So something that you need to do is to fix the GitHub repository. Is a defect to fix. It's going to happen. In the scenario that you reviewed in your previous quiz, for this one, Canvas, basically. Technical work. Obviously, if I ask you to implement this, the quiz is on Canvas. Technical work, hopefully you notice, this is the classical example of we need a repository for the information, a repository for the quiz that is going to be used to store and to read. That is classical example of the technical work. Estimation for that technical work, estimation for setting up the repository, the database. Hopefully, again, it's just set up a database. The expectation could be story points, 2, 4, something easy, even better, hours. I need 1 day, 2 days, I don't know. If you have never worked with databases and have no idea about databases, well, maybe you're going to use, obviously, story points. You're not going to be able to know about the time. And in story points, probably 16, 32, 64, depending on how crazy you think it is to set up a database. The automatic grading is a functional requirement. It's not technical work. Again, for technical work, think about something that usually is done by the IT department. When you need to call IT to set up something in a computer, install a software, configure access to something, those are the kind of things that we mention as technical work. But grading automatically, this automatic grading of the quizzes is a functional requirement. It's something that we need to program to implement and be sure that the software is able to do it. Functional requirement, a story is a feature, the automatic grading. Good. Knowledge acquisition here for the quizzes, hopefully is like nothing. Here, again, knowledge acquisition, I don't know if you need to learn HTML or you need to learn JSON or you need to learn CSS. Here is a big question mark about your previous experience and the new things that you need, if something, to do the system. Again, the expectation is that you're going to put knowledge acquisition items for something very, very specific and very, very special, like the domain particularities, or for a library that is very, very new or the top of the line. Not for this, unless, well, really something new, right? You are senior developers, but you are working with console application all your life, and suddenly you are in a new team, and this new team is developing web elements, and well, in your particular case, you need to learn these things. That could be a scenario in which, okay, go ahead. Defects, again, is dynamic. The other example, the one that I asked you to help me here, features, you helped me with that before. Technical work, any technical work for doing this, the drag and drop of the circles, triangles, and rectangles. And hopefully, like, no, it's a common, simple, trivial Java application, and the drag and drop is just part of the libraries. Knowledge acquisition is totally valid. That here, for instance, even though you know graphics in Java, you can do the frame and the panels and so on. That is kind of the core. But probably you need to learn about the drag and drop. Is just one particular library, one particular class, a set of methods. That is something that applies for knowledge acquisition. This one, the game of life. Hopefully you have the opportunity to check the web page. If I ask you to do this piece of software, hopefully the features, you already have it. If not, you can do it. All the explanation of the game is in the web page. Technical work. If I want this as a Java desktop, any technical work that you need to do. Like, well, it's another Java desktop application. It's another application with graphical elements. No. Knowledge acquisition. Anything that you need to learn in order to implement that game. What about learning the rules? Question in your exam, tricky. Learning the rules of the game is part of the knowledge acquisition, yes or no? Because remember that I showed you the game and I showed you one page with the rules, how the life is created. That is knowledge acquisition, yes or no? Okay, thank you, no. Like, why not? It's something that you need to learn before you start working. It's not something that you're going to develop. Understanding the rules, and this is a tricky question in your exams, and I am glad that you answer no. Understanding the rules is not something that you're going to put in the product backlog as an item. It's not something that you're going to do during your sprint. Understanding the rules is something that you are doing before starting with the project. It's something that you're doing when you talk with your customer and when you are trying to define your stories. And the stories should be there before you create the backlog for the product or for the sprint. So knowledge acquisition is not the knowledge that you need to understand the requirements. It's not about understanding requirements. It's about what you need to learn when you are doing the developing. It's things connected with the implementation. You mentioned examples, libraries, good, new tools, new elements that you need to use in the software, nothing that you are supposed to learn in the university, nothing that you are supposed to understand when collecting requirements. So knowledge acquisition, not the rules. The only thing here, maybe, again, if you need to research about how to use graphics with Java. And that's it with this case. Now, homework for you. Nothing to submit. Use one step before we start programming. Could you take a piece of paper and for this particular system, case 4, the game of life, you have the URL so you can review the game. For that case, can you put in a document the product backlog items that you consider are needed? And now, when I ask about the product backlog items, I am asking you for the stories that represent the features. I am talking about the knowledge acquisition, whatever thing that you need to learn. And well, as I mentioned before, you do not have the facts yet. And for the particular scenario, the technical work, hopefully you agree with me, nothing. And talking about the epics, hopefully you agree also, because I am giving you the full requirements. You have all the information needed. You do not have epics. You are able to put everything with stories. Thinking about this case 4, thinking about the stories that hopefully you already created, and adding the knowledge acquisition, whatever you need to learn new, can you think about the priority for every single story, or the priority for every single item in the knowledge acquisition? Moreover, can you figure out an estimation? An estimation, I am asking for hours, or I am asking for story points, any approach that you want to follow, but the stories and an estimation, and the stories with a particular priority. I would like to figure out how complex and how many time, hours, days, or weeks you will need to complete a Java version of this game. And we can talk about that in our next lecture. So I am not asking you to submit, not yet, but just for practice, could you create this report? And we talk about it in the next lecture. So any question? Okay, guys, see you next week. Thank you.